To help my childhood sweetheart, the crown prince, ascend the throne, I married the state preceptor. The state preceptor, named Zhu Yi, is a descendant of the serpent god, cold-blooded and lustful. I refused to consummate the marriage with him, causing him to suffer the backlash of the marriage contract, spitting blood every day. Later, I was poisoned to death by the crown prince. Zhu Yi sacrificed himself to grant me rebirth. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the night of my wedding with Zhu Yi. Zhu Yi turned away dejectedly after being rejected, but I urgently pulled him back and kissed him. Later, I lay contentedly in Zhu Yi's arms, playing with his fingers. Master of the nation, support me as the empress, and become my queen. How about that? After I died, my soul was bound to the mortal world by Zhu Yi. When Zhu Yi carried my corpse and walked step by step towards the altar, I was floating right beside him. Tears of blood streamed from my eyes as I wept and begged him not to sacrifice himself for me. Not worth it, yet he seemed oblivious. The man, who had always stood tall and straight, was now kneeling before the altar, bowing down in devout prayer. May I exchange my life for my wife to live again in this world. The divine punishment descended with a thunderous roar, and he was torn apart by 1,000 cuts. Yet all I saw were blossoms of blood blooming, breathtakingly beautiful. Fearing it would frighten me, Zhu Yi, even in death, remembered to shield my vision. Only his voice reached my ears, sorrowful yet hauntingly beautiful. May the light shine brightly, and may endless joy be everlasting. I suddenly opened my eyes, my back drenched in cold sweat. My heart was beating so fast it felt almost suffocating. Zhu Yi, I instinctively called out that name. The next second, my neck was grabbed by someone. I said, I won't go save the crown prince, Princess Mingjiao. Do you really like the crown prince so much? On our wedding night, you refused to share the room with me, yet for his sake, you begged me time and time again. Meeting Zhu Yi's bloodshot eyes, I snapped back to reality. Zhu Yi's sacrifice had succeeded. I had returned to 10 years ago. Today, I married Zhu Yi. However, the crown prince drank himself into a stupor at his residence and stabbed himself with a sword. The state preceptor Zhu Yi is a descendant of the snake god, a half-immortal capable of reviving the dead. I begged Zhu Yi to save the crown prince, but after a heated argument, Zhu Yi stormed off in anger. From then on, though we were called husband and wife, Zhu Yi and I always slept in separate rooms. At this moment, as I looked at Zhu Yi, who was still alive and well, tears instantly welled up in my eyes. Seeing this, Zhu Yi's eyelashes trembled sharply, and he immediately withdrew his hand. He seemed somewhat at a loss. Does your neck hurt? I didn't use much force. I shook my head, my voice choked with emotion. Zhu Yi, I'm sorry. Zhu Yi lifted my chin, carefully examining my neck. Not even a red mark was visible, so I hardened my heart once more. He gazed at me, his eyes filled with sorrow. Mingjiao, you need not apologize to me, nor try to soften my heart. Not taking the initiative to kill the crown prince is the greatest mercy I can offer, and it is only for your sake. I know you like the crown prince, but you've already married me and signed the marriage contract with me. If you don't consummate the marriage with me, I will. He paused at this point, as if too embarrassed to continue, and said no more. Snakes are highly lustful creatures, and once a descendant of the serpent god signs a marriage contract with a human, they must engage in intimate relations daily, or else they will suffer a backlash. In my previous life, I only learned about this later. At that time, Zhu Yi's body had already become very weak. Seeing Zhu Yi get up to leave, I quickly reached out and grabbed him. I don't like the crown prince, I like you. Zhu Yi's movements halted as he turned his head to look at me. He seemed moved for a moment, but soon his expression fell into desolation. Mingjiao, all along, whatever you said, I believed it. But tonight, even if you say you love me, I will not save the crown prince. At this point, he lowered his gaze, concealing the sorrow that was about to overflow. I won't stop you anymore. If you want to see the Crown Prince, go ahead. A moment of spring night is worth 1,000 pieces of gold. Why would I go see the Crown Prince? To stab him again, send him to the afterlife, as a wedding gift for us. I grew a bit impatient, sitting up and throwing myself into Juillet's embrace. Then, before he could even react, I flipped over and pinned him down on the bed. Juillet was startled by my sudden movement, but his hands instinctively came up to protect my head, afraid I might bump it against the bed. Mingjiao, you. He hadn't finished speaking when I kissed his lips. His words were tough, but his body was honest, instinctively responding to me. Half a minute later, he remembered to push me away, only to have his hand caught by mine. The moment our fingers intertwined, he seemed to lose all his strength. If you don't resist, I'll do as I please. I laugh, lying on top of him. My free hand lifts his shirt, my fingers wander aimlessly over his abs. Juillet's body grew hotter and hotter, and his gasps became more and more pleasing to the ear. I was so enticed that my heart fluttered, and my fingers unconsciously moved downward. Then, I was startled. The snake had too. My hands were burning. Caught in a dilemma. Suddenly, Juillet grasped my hand. His eyes held a hint of spring, and the roots of his ears were so red they seemed about to drip blood. Just as I thought he was about to do something further, the next second, a gust of wind came, and I couldn't move at all. Juillet used magic to immobilize me, then wrapped me tightly in a blanket, and then, he ran away on his own. In the study, Juillet didn't light the lamp, and his entire figure was shrouded in shadow, yet his face still felt warm. He took a deep breath and pointed his finger at the red character pasted on the window. In the next second, the red character split vertically down the middle, transforming into two small talking paper figures that floated onto the desk. Juillet rested his chin on his hand and earnestly asked the little paper figures, "Why is Mingjiao suddenly so enthusiastic towards me?" His voice was strained, as if he were embarrassed, yet also as if he had been humbled to the dust. But the two little paper figures spoke with piercing honesty. "Why do you care why she's enthusiastic, even if it's just a pretense? Would you really stop liking her? If I were you, I'd take advantage of her willingness to be intimate with you and use your body to keep her, making her crave the taste and unable to break free. Her heart belongs to the Crown Prince, but her body is with you. At least you have one of them, so be content." Juillet expressionlessly reached out and crumpled the two little paper figures. The two little paper figures looked down at their crumpled selves, overwhelmed with sorrow, all wrinkled and ugly. "Can't bear to touch her, so you come to bully us instead? Ha! I'm going to tell Princess Mingjiao that you're not some noble and upright state preceptor at all, you're just a bad." Before the little paper figure could utter the word snake, Juillet waved his hand and withdrew the spiritual energy he had placed on the two small paper figures. Picking up the window decoration that had returned to the shape of the character, Juillet walked to the window and reattached it, but as he lifted his gaze, his movements suddenly froze. Under the distant flowering tree, a young woman in wedding attire stood gracefully. The moonlight shone upon her, making her snow-white skin and flower-like features appear even more delicate and captivating. Yet, kneeling before the young woman was a person who seemed to spoil the scene. It was a member of the imperial clan's secret guard. The emperor is now increasingly favoring the third prince and the imperial consort. The empress is being suppressed in the rear palace, and the crown prince is struggling in the imperial court. Now the crown prince's life hangs in the balance for you, and the empress, upon hearing this tragic news, has been left half dead. I implore you, princess, to quickly summon the state preceptor to save them." The voice was carried by the wind into her ears, and Juillet's face darkened. The fingers gripping the window tightened abruptly. In an instant, the wooden window shattered into splinters. Only the double happiness window paper cut was spared, yet it too fell to the ground, covered in dust. The immobilization spell cast by Juillet lasted only 5 short minutes. After the spell was lifted, there wasn't even the slightest tingling sensation left on my body. I sat up wrapped in the quilt, gritted my teeth, and couldn't help but laugh again. Someone who truly loves you will consider every little detail for you. Even if you've stirred his heart into chaos, he will still love you instinctively. I got dressed and got out of bed to go find Juye. If we don't consummate the marriage soon, this man is going to cough up blood. However, I had just stepped off the long corridor when someone suddenly knelt before me with a swish, before the secret guard could finish speaking. I already felt the air around me grow several degrees colder. I instinctively looked up and saw Juye standing by the study window from afar. Wait, where is the carved window? I was momentarily distracted, and the hidden guard followed my gaze. When he saw Juye, his body trembled slightly. Juye met my gaze, walked straight through the wall, and came toward me. His figure flickered in and out of view under the moonlight, and in just a few breaths, he stood before me. Truly worthy of being a descendant of the serpent god, I marveled. How could one not envy and yearn for such immense power? In my past life, I was ambitious, even scheming to seize Juye's divine power, but he was too good, so when it was within easy reach, I withdrew my hand, and then, in the game against the Crown Prince, I lost my life. In this life, my ambition remains unchanged, and I want even more, but regarding Juye, I only want him as a person, no, as a snake. I withdrew my gaze and looked at the kneeling shadow guard on the ground. The shadow guard had already lost all awareness. Under Juye's control, he stood up, flew out of the state preceptor's residence, and then fell outside the courtyard wall. My expression unchanged, I turned my gaze toward Juye. Juye's delicate and beautiful features were hidden in the night beneath the trees outside the corridor. His expression was unclear, but his aura was so strong it was impossible to ignore. Juye probably always thought I was pure and kind, a lotus blooming from the mud. He thought that by scaring me, I would stay by his side forever. But he doesn't know, my heart is black. At this moment, the more dangerous he appears, the more aroused I become. Juye looks at me. Don't you have anything to say? Ming Zhao. His voice was extremely cold, as if covered in a layer of ice. But I wasn't the least bit afraid. Those who are favored always act without fear. And they are prone to becoming arrogant from excessive indulgence. I laughed, pushing Juye against the tree. Of course I have something to say. Under Juye's astonished gaze, I kissed his lips. I like you, Juye. I won't save the Crown Prince, I'll save you. I took a bite of Juye's Adam's apple, then whispered in his ear with a breath as fragrant as orchids, I want to share the clouds and rain of Mount Wu with you, a night of passionate lovemaking. The next day when I woke up, the sun was already high in the sky. My body had been carefully cleaned, feeling very refreshed, but my waist, hands, and legs were sore everywhere, ached. My throat was especially dry and parched. My mind was still a bit hazy as I sat up, half closing my eyes. Just as I was about to look for some water to drink, a cup of floral tea was brought to my lips. The temperature was just right, neither too cold nor too hot. I suddenly opened my eyes and met Juye's strikingly beautiful gaze. Eyes filled with a smile, along with a hint of shyness that seemed hesitant to speak. I couldn't help but laugh, my gaze sweeping over the faint redness at the base of Juye's ears. Then I lowered my eyes and, holding Juye's hand, drank the entire cup of tea. My throat felt soothed, and I felt much better overall. Juye set the teacup aside, and only then did I notice he was simply draped in an outer robe. His long hair was disheveled, his neck covered in kiss marks, his back bearing several scratches, with bite marks on his shoulders and collarbone. The memories of last night's passionate and indulgent moments surged back like a tide. Madness. But we clicked, it's addictive. Under my undisguised gaze, Juye soon blushed beyond just his ears. He leaned in close to me, covering my eyes with his hand, and only then asked, "Why do you keep looking at me?" I deliberately blinked, letting my long eyelashes brush against his palm, satisfied to feel his movements pause. I then leisurely said, "Because you're good-looking." Zhuyi didn't move his hand away and asked somewhat incoherently, "Last night, I waited for a while, but he didn't continue. Given how difficult it was for him to bring it up, it was easy to guess what he wanted to ask. To be honest, last night's performance far exceeded my expectations. I originally thought that between a human and a snake, that aspect would be difficult to harmonize. I never expected it to be so comfortable. So exhilarating. Perhaps it's because he obediently used only one. In short, it makes one crave for more." I pulled down Zhuye's hand that was covering my eyes and pressed my lips against his. Again, I spent several days with Zhuye in such a shameless manner. The Crown Prince sent a letter over. Just like in my previous life, the Crown Prince did not need Zhuye to save him. Nor would he die. The imperial physicians of the imperial hospital, bound by the fate of their 9 clans, were never mere decorations. The Crown Prince, dragging his barely alive, sickly body, still wants to hold a grand birthday banquet. In the study, Zhuye sat beside me. Seeing the content of the invitation, he couldn't help but let out a light scoff. I smiled, thinking even his sarcastic tone was endearing. Just as I was about to decline the invitation, something suddenly occurred to me. The messenger who delivered the invitation hadn't left yet, so I had him summoned and asked from behind the screen, "Who will be attending the Crown Prince's birthday banquet?" The messenger listed a series of names, all of whom I had been familiar with during my youth, along with the Crown Prince. I couldn't help but interrupt him and get straight to the point. "Will General Zhong's legitimate daughter not be attending this birthday banquet for the Empress? Should be an opportunity in another sense to evaluate noble daughters from prominent families for the Crown Prince." The person delivering the post was taken aback, clearly puzzled as to why I would suddenly ask about Zhong Lingyu. After all, in his view, Zhong Lingyu and I had never had any interaction. At least before this moment, we had never met. Zhong Lingyu had always lived in the northern desert with his parents and only returned to the capital at the beginning of the year. His Highness the Crown Prince has already sent an invitation to General Zhong's residence. Presumably, in a few days, Miss Zhong will also attend the banquet. As he spoke, the man paused, glanced at Zhuye, and then looked at me. His Highness the Crown Prince had no choice but to invite Miss Zhong to the banquet. "I hope you won't take it to heart. His Highness truly cares for you." Before this loyal servant, who was oblivious to the situation, could finish his words, he was swept up by a gust of wind and thrown out. I looked towards Zhuye. Zhuye's face is as dark as water. I soothingly hook Zhuye's hand. "Help me hypnotize him. Make him forget the conversation I just had with him." Zhuye was like an exceptionally easy-to-please cat, instantly soothed by my touch. He didn't ask me why I did this, but instead, a bright light gathered at his fingertips and touched the person lying on the ground outside the door. I thought of Zhong Lingyu and added, "Also, have him reply to the Crown Prince that I will attend the banquet." Candle Knight paused, turned his head to look at me, and bristled with anger. "Are you going to attend the Crown Prince's birthday banquet?" I nodded, and Zhuye immediately stood up and walked out. Resting my chin in my hand, I watched his retreating figure, picked up the brush on the table, dipped it in a bit of cinnabar, and drew a line on my hand. Then I let out an exaggerated hiss, hearing my cry of pain. Zhuye abruptly stopped in his tracks. Half a second later, he turned back to look at me. "Where are you hurt?" I didn't say a word, just stretched out my hand. Meeting his concerned gaze, my heart softened completely. Zhuye held my hand, looking at the fake bloodstains on it that couldn't be more artificial, and fell into silence. Zhuye, even when the beauty was speechless, it was still a pleasing sight to behold. I couldn't help but laugh, yet I also felt like crying. Zhuye is a descendant of the serpent deity, with senses far more acute than those of ordinary people. In theory, He should be able to detect the presence of blood in the air within a second. But worry can cloud one's judgment. Such a heart that loved me so completely. Yet in my past life, this heartless and wicked woman, betrayed it so thoroughly. I wrapped my arms around Juye's waist and buried my face in his chest. Juye, with a stern expression, lifted my chin, forcing me to look up at him. Mingjiao, give me an explanation for attending the Crown Prince's birthday banquet. Any explanation will do, even if it's just to fool him. But it can't be because of the Crown Prince, at the very least. It can't be said to be because of the Crown Prince. I saw through Juye's thoughts, and it made my heart ache even more. I attended the banquet only for Zhong Lingyu. Upon hearing this, Juye was taken aback, looking at me with a mix of surprise and hurt. Do you like Zhong Lingyu? I was stunned by Juye's bizarre train of thought. Gritting my teeth, I grabbed his hand and bit it. What on earth is going through this person's mind? After biting, my gaze involuntarily fell on Juye's slender, jade-like fingers. It's really beautiful. I swallowed hard, my mind wandering into fantasies. So I reached up, hooked Juye's neck, and kissed his lips. Juye didn't expect me to suddenly kiss him. After a moment of daze, he finally responded to me. Mingjiao, you. I affectionately traced the shape of his lips with the tip of my tongue. How about, in the study today, I had stirred up such a frenzy in Juye that he lost all sense of restraint. It was only then that I realized just how insatiable his desires could be once they were awakened. In the first few days, he had held back, fearing I couldn't handle it. Now that you've discovered I like it, you're unwilling to let me go. The study was soon in disarray, with all the books on the desk soaked through. I was forced to tears, crying intermittently and begging him to be gentler, slower. He agreed with his words perfectly, but in action, he paid no heed at all. Candlelit night, the waves rise and fall. I lost myself several times, my mind went blank, and I forgot to breathe. I nearly drowned in this sea of desire, yet he kept pulling me back up again and again. The lingering sensation hadn't faded, my body was still trembling, and I couldn't help but push him away. But my hands were weak and powerless, almost as if I was feigning resistance. Juye, stop. Juye bit my earlobe, his warm breath misting in my ear. He deliberately mimicked the words I had teased him with that day, tempting me to itch with desire. Again, on the day of the Crown Prince's birthday banquet, the weather was not particularly good. The sky was overcast, as if it were about to rain. Juye never usually attended such banquets, but this time, he went out with me. The banquet was held in the palace. When we entered the hall, the palace maids led Juye and me in two different directions. The reason given was that men and women should be separated and seated apart. Juye's expression turned grim. I scratched his palm and whispered in his ear, after the banquet, let's go home together. Hearing this, Juye's brows and eyes relaxed. I was led to my seat by the palace maid, but before I could sit down, the announcement from the eunuch outside the hall was heard. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has arrived. Everyone around stood up to pay their respects to the Crown Prince. I looked across the room. Juye remained seated, showing no intention of rising. As the state preceptor, his status is highly revered. One only needs to bow when meeting the emperor on formal occasions, and there is no need to bend over. On sacrificial days, the emperor must even lower his head to him at the altar. Power, truly is captivating. Juye noticed my gaze and looked up to meet my eyes. I smiled at him. He also curved his eyes and brows. A figure suddenly and inopportunely blocked the middle. I was forced to withdraw my gaze and then met the Crown Prince's eyes. The Crown Prince, still recovering from serious injuries, looked pale. Those eyes, as gentle as water as always, yet with an exhaustion and sorrow that could not be concealed. He stood before me, calling out, Jiao. I looked at him with little expression. He seemed to be stung by my reaction. Covering his lips as he coughed up blood, I frowned. Suddenly, I remembered how Zhu Yi had vomited blood in my previous life. However, the Crown Prince mistook my expression for sympathy and comforted me softly. "Don't worry, Zhao Zhao, I'm fine." No. I wasn't worried about you. Remembering Zhu Yi's terrifyingly sharp hearing, a sense of foreboding suddenly washed over me. The Crown Prince, supported by the eunuch, took his seat on the high throne. I looked toward the direction where Zhuye was. Then I saw the teacup in Zhuye's hand turn into dust. Although I greatly enjoyed the passionate intimacy with Zhuye, but the experience in the study that day and night still makes my legs weak when I think about it now. In the past few days of intimacy, I have been forcing myself to stop at just one time, keeping it brief. Now, with the Crown Prince stirring things up like this, I'm afraid I won't be able to hold back anymore. I picked up the teacup beside me, deciding to take a sip to calm my nerves, yet I couldn't help but lift my gaze once more towards Zhuye, successfully meeting Zhuye's expressionless face. The next second, Zhuye looked at me and suddenly smiled. The smile was beautiful, and also deeply meaningful. My hand holding the cup trembled unconsciously. "Your Highness seems so downcast. Could it be that you've heard about the Crown Prince's engagement to the young lady of the Zhong family?" A woman's voice suddenly rang out. I withdrew my gaze and looked toward the girl who had somehow appeared beside me. The girl smiled at me, thinking I would be upset upon hearing this. Could it be that this girl didn't notice the meaningful glances between me and Zhuye? How could she think I couldn't smile because of the Crown Prince and Zhong Lingyu? Thinking of Zhong Lingyu, I couldn't help but tilt my head and glance toward the lower seats, searching for her figure. Just in time, I saw her rise from her seat. I stood up as well and said to the young lady before me, whose minor grievances I had long since forgotten over time, "Thank you for the reminder." My sincere thanks made the girl's face instantly fall. Zhong Lingyu came from a military family, was very tall, and wore her hair in a high ponytail. When she stood up, she truly stood out like a crane among chickens. Among the eunuchs beside her and the guards outside the hall, many were not as tall as she was. I followed Zhong Lingyu all the way to the edge of the rockery. Zhong Lingyu stopped in her tracks, turned her head, and looked at me warily. "Why have you been following me all this time?" The maid beside her tugged at her sleeve and whispered a reminder to her. "This is the Junju." The Junju holds a rank, specifically a first-rank official. Logically speaking, as a general's daughter without any official rank, she shouldn't address me directly as you from the start. Zhong Lingyu corrected herself in an instant, smiling at me. "Why has the Junju been following me all this time?" I was amused by her reaction and waved away the maids who were following me. "Lingyu, shall we have a chat?" I called her name so naturally that Zhong Lingyu widened her eyes in surprise. I hadn't expected to address her so intimately the first time we met. After hesitating for a moment, Zhong Lingyu also dismissed the maidservant by her side. I walked over to Zhong Lingyu and looked up at her. Just now, that young lady deliberately mentioned her and the Crown Prince, trying to make me feel uncomfortable. I did feel uncomfortable, but not because of the Crown Prince, but because of her. "I know you don't want to marry the Crown Prince, but you're struggling to defy the imperial authority. I can help you resolve this matter, as long as you follow me from now on." Zhong Lingyu looked at me in astonishment. After a long pause, he tentatively asked, "You, like women, why does this person's train of thought feel so familiar? In my past life, this person wasn't my confidant, but rather Zhuye's, right?" Just as I was at a loss for words, I suddenly noticed the air around me grow cold, without even looking around. I knew it was Zhuye who had arrived. Recalling how I was unexpectedly set up by the Crown Prince earlier, I pretended not to know, looking seriously at Zhong Lingyu. "I only like my husband, Zhu Yi." I deliberately pronounced the two words Zhu Yi with lingering affection and tenderness. The surrounding temperature then rose, wrapping around me like a warm current. "Very good. Tonight will be a humid, gentle summer night. Satisfied with the answer, Zhu Yi left. He did not directly appear to disturb the conversation between me and Zhong Lingyu. I looked at Zhong Lingyu, plucked a gardenia flower, and handed it to her. Zhong Lingyu probably misunderstood again, looking at me with a strange expression. I sighed lightly in exasperation and began to recite a poem. Though 2 leaves are given as a gift, our friendship will never fade because of it. Where does the shared heart hold its regret? The gardenia touches people most deeply. After hearing this, Zhong Lingyu's expression instantly changed. This poem originated from the world Zhong Lingyu once belonged to. It was written by Liu Lingxian during the Southern and Northern dynasties. It was also in my previous life that Zhong Lingyu recited it to me personally. Zhong Lingyu didn't particularly love poetry. The reason she could remember this obscure poem was, first, because she liked gardenias, and second, because this poem celebrates friendship between women. Zhong Lingyu stared at me wide-eyed. Her body trembling with excitement, she took a deep breath and instinctively spoke to test the waters. Odd changes, even remains unchanged. I paused for 2 seconds, then continued her words with a mix of helplessness and affection. The sign depends on the quadrant. Zhong Lingyu was indeed shocked and immediately stepped forward, tightly grasping my hand. Sis, you're a time traveler too. Me, watching her get so excited that she reveals her true personality, I couldn't help but laugh. I'm not, but I have a very, very good friend who is. Zhong Lingyu was bewildered. Friend? Yes, I nodded, looking at Zhong Lingyu. In my previous life, you were a friend who shared life and death with me. You saw my ambition, yet you didn't laugh at me for overestimating myself or for my wild dreams. Instead, you reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder, saying, "Why can't a woman be emperor?" Of course, a woman can be emperor. Unfortunately, later on, I lost in the political struggle with the crown prince because of the word love, although I did my best to protect Zhong Lingyu before my death. I imagine her life won't be much easier. After all, like me, Lingyu is someone who deeply craves freedom, power, and control over her own destiny. Fortunately, with time now reversed, everything has a chance to start over. Thinking of the reversal of time, I can't help but picture the figure kneeling on the altar and the blooming blood-red flowers. Candlelit night. Even if I hadn't been moved by candlelit night in my past life, I think I would still be moved by him for this scene alone. I am not a fool. Of course I know that candlelit night deliberately locked my soul by his side, making me witness everything he has done for me. He wants me to fall in love out of guilt. But he doesn't know that my fondness for him actually started much earlier. Thus, his scheming only makes me feel heartache for him. My thoughts return to the present as I gaze at Zhong Lingyu standing before me. Have you made up your mind? Do you want to come with me? Zhong Lingyu's excitement still hasn't settled down, and upon hearing this, she immediately hugged me. I'm in, your XX. The last 2 words were directly muted. Realizing this, Zhong Lingyu was practically furious. Raising her head to curse the heavens, damn it, I can talk about time travel, but I can't talk about cross-dressing, right? I'm not XXXX, it's starting again. In my previous life, Zhong Lingyu was restricted by the rules of this world and couldn't mention certain specific words, so when she spoke to me, her words would be missing characters, making it completely incomprehensible at first listen. But I have been close to her for nearly 10 years, and no matter how difficult it is to understand, over time, I can still guess the gist of it. It is highly likely that my world is a scripted novel, and she is a transmigrator who knows the plot but cannot reveal its contents to me. Judging from her attitude toward me and her understanding, I am most likely an extremely important character in the book. I leaned lazily against the rockery, smiling as I watched Zhong Lingyu scold the heavens with her hands on her hips. This person is still so full of vitality. The phrase "full of vitality" was also taught to me by Zhong Lingyu in my previous life. At that time, she leaned on my shoulder and said, "Jiao Jiao, More than half of the women in this capital are living dead. They seem alive, but in reality, they are already dead, with not a shred of vitality. She didn't know that before I met her and Juye in my youth, I was also a living dead. Father ignored me, mother mistreated me, and I placed my spiritual and emotional hopes in the Empress and the Crown Prince, yet they both abandoned me without exception. In my confusion and pain, I struggled desperately, relying on her and Juye's help to crawl out of the mire. In this life, I will live as a true and genuine person. I do not want to spend my entire life toiling and striving, like the Empress and my mother, solely for the sake of men. I will ascend to the supreme throne and tell the world. A woman can also wield power over the world while awake and lie in the embrace of a beauty while drunk. After parting ways with Zhong Lingyu, I headed back, but halfway there, I was intercepted by the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince, wrapped in a cloak, had broken into a cold sweat on his forehead due to the pain from his severe, unhealed wounds. The Crown Prince is unwell and should return to the palace early. There's no need to block my way on the road. Before I could finish speaking, a joyful smile appeared on the Crown Prince's face. Are you feeling sorry for me? Me? I looked at the Crown Prince with an expressionless face. The smile on the Crown Prince's face gradually faded, replaced by a bitter expression. Zhao, are you blaming me for making you marry the Grand Preceptor? I shook my head. Although you were the one who suggested marrying Juye, it was something I agreed to after careful consideration. In this matter, if you think about it carefully, you don't owe me anything. Similarly, I don't owe you anything either. As an orphaned girl with a title but no parents, I was abandoned by you because I didn't offer enough benefits and, having already aligned with your faction, no longer needed to be courted. It's perfectly normal. If our positions were reversed, I would most likely do the same as you. We are both people who value power more. The reason you and I ended up in a life or death struggle in our previous lives was simply because we were political rivals, and there was only one throne. It had nothing to do with love. The Crown Prince didn't expect me to be so calm, and his expression grew even more unpleasant. Zhao, are you completely indifferent to me now? I rubbed my forehead. Why didn't I realize in my past life that the Crown Prince was so entangled in love at this time? Perhaps it's because, in my past life, I also had feelings for the Crown Prince at this time. It wasn't a deep, unforgettable love, but as childhood sweethearts who grew up together without any reservations, there was always a certain flutter of the heart. After all, at that time, I had nothing. So the Crown Prince, who always stood in front to protect me, and the Empress, who treated me like her own daughter, became my lifelines. I saw the Empress as my future mother-in-law and the Crown Prince as my future husband. I thought I would be the future Crown Princess. For every bit of kindness they show me, I repay them tenfold. Then they said I must marry the State Preceptor Juye, with whom I have never exchanged a word. I need to win over Juye to strengthen the Crown Prince's faction, or else, if the third prince ascends the throne, they will all die. After hearing this, I locked myself in a pitch-black room, letting tears soak my pillow. The next day, I signed my name on the marriage contract that Juye had sent over. I thought, I must save them. These were the two people in the world who had been the best to me. I couldn't just stand by and watch them die. Looking back now, I realize I had received far too little love back then. If I had met Juye or Zhong Lingyu first, I wouldn't have shed those tears all night long. Recalling everything that had happened, I ignored the Crown Prince and walked straight past him. The Crown Prince reached out as if to stop me, but in the end, his hand only brushed against my sleeve. Her Majesty the Empress wishes to see you. The Crown Prince's weak voice sounded from behind, and I uncontrollably halted my steps, seeing that I was finally moved. The Crown Prince glanced at the eunuch beside him and ordered, "Escort the princess to the Pepper Chamber Palace to see the Empress." I waved my hand without looking back. "No need, I know the way to the Pepper Chamber Hall." The crown prince was taken aback, revealing a bitter smile. Indeed, in your heart, the Empress Dowager is more important than I am. If I wanted to see you, I suppose you wouldn't come. I let out a soft sigh and turned to look at the crown prince. With utmost propriety and a sense of distance, I performed a respectful bow. Your Highness, please show some restraint. I am now a married woman, on my way to see the Empress. I encountered an unexpected guest, Marquis Shen Jinghui. Shen Jinghui has always been a notorious playboy. Now, drunk and even more confused, he actually blocked my path and tried to embrace me. Already irritated, I dragged him straight to the nearby lake and pushed his head into the water. I naturally knew that Shen Jinghui's sudden appearance was the result of someone scheming behind the scenes, and the person behind this is most likely the third prince and the imperial consort. The reason is nothing more than to drive a wedge between me, the Empress, and the crown prince, but no matter how many twists and turns lie behind it, it doesn't stop me from dealing with Shen Jinghui right now. In my previous life, Shen Jinghui married Princess Changning, but after the wedding, he frequently visited brothels and pleasure quarters, causing her to die of depression. I entered the palace at the age of 6 to serve as a study companion for Princess Changning. The eldest daughter of the Empress, at that time, I had not yet been granted the title of princess, and in terms of status, I was the only child of the Prince of Anan. Everyone in the palace knew that the Emperor, because of the Empress, deeply despised the Prince of Anan, and the Prince of Anan had been bedridden with illness for many years. As a result, the palace staff treated me decently on the surface, but their attitude in private was rather poor. Changning was 2 years younger than me. Naturally kind-hearted, treated me like an older sister, and often stood up for me. Although I later had disagreements with the Empress and the Crown Prince, I always regarded Changning as a sister. Shen Jinghui, jolted awake by the cold water of the lake, began struggling incessantly, with an expressionless face. I held him down, forcing him to swallow several mouthfuls of lake water before leisurely releasing my grip. Shen Jinghui collapsed on the ground, coughing and choking uncontrollably. While glaring at me with furious eyes, "Mingjiao, have you lost your mind?" I looked down at him from above. The title young Marquis is merely a way to elevate one's status. Shen Jinghui is currently just the legitimate son of the Marquis's household, without any official title. In terms of rank, he is far beneath me. Shen Jinghui got up from the ground with resentment, pointing at my nose and saying, "What a grand display of authority, princess. Daring to kill someone right here in the depths of the palace." I brushed his hand away and replied with a tone of indifference, "Not as impressive as you, who still can't keep your lust in check even within the palace walls. Already a fool, yet you still seek your own demise." Shen Jinghui was so furious that his face flushed red and his neck bulged. "I'll go tell my aunt right now and ask her to uphold justice for me." The aunt Shen Jinghui referred to was the Empress. It was precisely because of this connection that he, a son of a Marquis's household, could be respectfully addressed as young Marquis even before being officially designated as the heir. After Shen Jinghui left, the maid who had witnessed the entire scene looked at me trembling with fear. "Your Highness." I looked at her and reassured her, "There's no need to worry." After saying that, I continued on my way to the Pepper Room Palace. When I arrived at the Pepper Room Palace, Shen Jinghui was already kneeling before the Empress, tears and snot streaming down his face, putting on a pitiful act with great skill. Upon seeing me arrive, Shen Jinghui couldn't help but reveal a glimmer of joy in his eyes. "Aunt, you must stand up for me. Ming Jiao first harmed my cousin, the Crown Prince, and now she wants to kill me. How can such a malicious troublemaker be allowed to continue wreaking havoc in this world?" I remained expressionless and bowed to the Empress. The Empress gazed at me deeply. The hall fell into an extreme silence, with all the palace attendants holding their breath. Shen Jinghui's smile grew wider and wider. Suddenly, the Empress took my hand and spoke gently. Mingzhao has always been well behaved, never doing anything wrong. Then she looked at Shen Jinghui. Her eyes filled with warning. You drank too much wine yourself and accidentally fell into the lake. How can you blame her? Shen Jinghui's smile on his face suddenly froze. He looked at the Empress in disbelief, then at me. After leaving the Pepper Room Hall, Shen Jinghui still seemed lost and absent-minded. I couldn't be bothered to deal with him and just kept walking forward. Shen Jinghui, however, chased after me. Why would my aunt take your side? Today was probably the day Shen Jinghui had been the most curious in his entire life. I looked at Shen Jinghui, recalling the gentle face and dignified, composed demeanor of the Empress. Perhaps it was because I was still useful to the Empress, and the Crown Prince could not afford to lose my support at this time. Or perhaps it was because the Queen is merely your aunt, but she is my own mother. In my previous life, I was defeated by the Crown Prince, not because of love, not because of friendship, but because of family ties. Rather than saying I lost to the Crown Prince, rather, I lost to the Queen, lost to the longing for mother-daughter affection. That cup of poisoned wine that took my life was sent by the Crown Prince in the name of the Empress. I walked onto the winding corridor. As I lifted my gaze, I saw Zhuye standing at the far end. In an instant, all my worries vanished. I lifted the hem of my skirt and ran toward Zhuye. He caught me in his arms. The banquet is over. Shall we go home together? Zhuye looked down and asked me, his eyes sparkling like stars. I looked up and saw the Crown Prince standing in the distance. I withdrew my gaze and said to Zhuye, "All right." Zhuye took my hand, his grip somewhat firm. Clearly, he had also seen the Crown Prince. In the words of Zhong Lingyu's world, both Zhuye and I are people with extreme insecurity. However, I have memories from my past life and know how much Zhuye loves me, so my heart is at peace. But Zhuye has no such memories. In his eyes, my change of heart came too abruptly, leaving him unsettled. However, if he had memories from his past life, he would probably despise me. In my previous life, I married him because of the Crown Prince, and because of the Crown Prince, a rift grew between us. Later, I turned against the Crown Prince, yet for the sake of the throne, I pushed him further away. How terrible! I cursed myself silently in my heart. Looking at Zhuye again, seeing him torn between hope and fear, I couldn't help but feel a pang of heartache. I owe him far too much. I tightly grasped Zhuye's hand, interlocking our fingers. Zhuye's tense body suddenly relaxed, and he lowered his gaze to look at me. I curved my eyes at him and smiled. Let's go home. As I passed by the Crown Prince, I caught the scent of blood on him. Zhuye's senses were far superior to mine, so he naturally smelled it too, and his steps faltered slightly. I remained expressionless. Pulling Zhuye out of the palace gate, once in the carriage, Zhuye looked at me. I thought you would care about the injuries on the Crown Prince's body. His wounds have reopened. I looked back at Zhuye. I don't care. Would you think me heartless? Zhuye immediately shook his head. Of course not. I smiled. That's fine. Although his injury was caused by me, it wasn't at my instigation. What I need to care about is not his injury, but your heart. Zhuye was stunned. I sat in Zhuye's arms, held his face, kissed him, and tried to give him a sense of security. Let me say it again. The person I like now is you. Zhuye, I hope you are happy, and I also hope you know my heart. Just as I was kissing Zhuye, unable to tear myself away, the carriage suddenly came to a halt. My body lurched forward due to inertia, and I accidentally bit his lip. Zhuye let out a soft, pleasant groan. I hurriedly sat up to check the wound on his lip. Fortunately, it was only a small bite. I breathed a sigh of relief and went to rummage through the medicine box in the carriage. Seeing how anxious I was for him, Zhuye instead laughed and pulled me back. It's fine. This little injury means nothing to me. As he spoke, he took my hand and pressed it against his lips. The wound healed in an instant. I forgot he wasn't an ordinary person. He was a descendant of the snake god. capable of regenerating flesh and bone. I blinked, not expecting that I would make such a careless mistake, yet Juye was clearly overjoyed, holding the back of my head and kissing me again. Suddenly, the coachman's voice came from outside the carriage. Master of divination, the carriage from General Zhong's residence ahead has encountered a problem. In my previous life, I thought all the servants around Juye were real people. But I later found out that most of them were puppets that resembled humans and were imbued with spirituality. The coachman at this moment was one of those puppets. Hearing the coachman's words, I pushed Juye away, straightened my clothes and hair, lifted the curtain by the carriage window, and looked outside. Sure enough, I saw Zhong Lingyu and her mother getting down from the broken carriage. I looked at Juye, who was disturbed in his mood, frowning as he sat up. The general's mansion is still far from here. Shall we pick up Lingyu and her mother and take them back to the mansion in the carriage? Upon hearing this, Juye's frown deepened. Yet he didn't want to refuse me outright. He looked like a delicate and beautiful porcelain piece cast in a dim light. I raised an eyebrow. What's wrong? Juye reached out and pulled me into his embrace, resting his chin on my shoulder, and said gloomily, "They were just discussing you and the crown prince in the carriage. I found it somewhat amusing. Who taught him to sound and look so pitiful? Wait, could it be that you learned it from me?" I raised my hand and stroked Juye's head. Just like petting a cat, such great hair quality. What did they say about me and the crown prince? Just now in the carriage, I didn't hear anything at all. Juye, with his exceptionally sharp hearing, began to recount the conversation between Zhong Lingyu and her mother. "Mother, you don't want me to marry the crown prince either, do you? The crown prince and Princess Mingjiao are in love. His affection for the princess is known throughout the world." At today's banquet, the crown prince was well aware that the state preceptor and the princess had already become husband and wife, yet he insisted on invoking the rule that men and women should be seated separately. This excuse was full of holes, but the crown prince was determined to have his way, disregarding all else. "My daughter, if you resembled Princess Mingjiao, perhaps you could dominate the imperial harem just as the current noble consort has replaced the empress. But you bear no resemblance whatsoever to Princess Mingjiao in appearance." Juye's tone was flat and devoid of any emotion. Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Juye, hearing my laughter, gently nibbled on my earlobe and deliberately repeated in my ear, "The crown prince and Princess Mingjiao are in love." When he reached the words "in love," Juye deliberately emphasized his tone. Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Juye looked at me, gritting his teeth in feigned anger. "Mingjiao," I turned my head and kissed him. The state preceptor getting jealous is truly amusing. Juye is an extremely easy person to coax. I pressed him against the carriage wall and kissed him for a while, and his jealousy subsided. But he still refused to let Zhong Lingyu and her mother get into the carriage. I was puzzled by Juye's attitude, and when I saw him blushing with embarrassment, I followed his gaze downward. Then, I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. This situation really isn't suitable for Lingyu to bring her mother onto the carriage. Once the desires of the night are stirred, they are difficult to suppress. The state preceptor's residence is relatively close to here, and the knight guided a bird to land on his shoulder, effortlessly hypnotizing it. He sent it to the mansion to notify the other puppets to bring a new carriage and escort Zhong Lingyu and her mother back to the general's mansion. I watched in amazement, unable to suppress a sense of longing for Juye's divine power. It was merely longing, not scheming. Juye met my gaze. Knowing I was interested in his power, he showed no displeasure. Instead, he smiled and asked, "Would you like to learn?" I was taken aback. "Can a mere mortal like me also learn magic?" Juye looked at me, his gaze deepening for a moment as if lost in thought. "Others may not learn it, but you can." I didn't notice. My heart filled with the joy of being able to learn magic, and my eyes immediately lit up. Zhu Yi's smile was bewitching as he leaned down to kiss my eyes. I'll teach you tonight. Let's start with dual cultivation. Summer nights are especially stirring. The rain poured down heavily, beating against the flower branches outside the window. The air was hot and humid, and the flower branches trembled in the wind, dripping with moisture. Zhu Yi kept looking at me. His eyes as beautiful as if they held a flowing galaxy. It lured me into its depths, making me want to explore, only to sink deeper and deeper. My tears were forced out, only to be kissed away by him, gentle yet domineering. Occasionally, when he lost control of his strength, he would even apologize and let me bite him. But when I couldn't bear it any longer and my fingers clawed at his back, he would firmly grasp my wrists, interlocking our fingers, and press them against the edge of the bed, leaving no room for refusal. Be careful not to split your nails. I'm afraid it'll hurt you. Zhu Yi's eyelashes were all wet. After saying this with a smile, he leaned down again to kiss my collarbone. If you're afraid it'll hurt me, why are you still making such a fuss? I wanted to bite him. But he picked me up again and carried me to the couch by the window. Once again, I deeply resonate with you. The summer night's downpour did not cease until dawn was about to break. I lay contentedly in Zhu Yi's embrace, toying with his fingers. Master of the nation, support me as the empress, and become my queen. How about that? Candle Knight gently and tenderly kissed my temple hair. After the matter is accomplished, how will the empress reward me? I held Candle Knight's 2 fingers, looking up at him with a half smile. How about it? Candle Knight was easily stirred to passion by me, lowering his head to kiss me deeply. The sun hasn't risen yet. The night isn't over. Let's do it one more time. A few days later, it was my birthday. Zhu Yi wanted to throw a grand birthday banquet for me, but I didn't agree. The Crown Prince and I were actually born in the same year, same month, and same day. He's only a few hours older than me. Today is just a false birthday fabricated for me by the Princess of Anan, so there's no need to trouble yourself. Zhu Yi paused in his movements and turned to look at me. I pulled him along and continued. The Crown Prince is actually the son of the Prince of Anan and the Princess of Anan, and I am the daughter of the Emperor and Empress. Upon hearing this, Zhu Yi couldn't help but frown. As I looked at Zhu Yi, I suddenly remembered my past life. On that late night when I learned the truth about my origins, my mind was in turmoil, and I drank myself into a stupor. In my dazed state, I followed my instincts and ran to the front of Zhu Yi's house. Along the way, the alcohol took its toll, leaving my limbs weak and limp, without a lantern to light my path. I stumbled and fell several times. My face and clothes were covered in mud, making me look utterly disheveled. Inside the house, Zhu Yi sat under the lamp, as still and flawless as a jade statue, like the moon in the sky. It was unattainable, far, far away from me. That night, Zhu Yi looked at me through the window, his gaze as calm as water. Meeting his eyes, I felt inexplicably ashamed and turned to run back. The branches in the garden scratched my face, but I didn't even notice, until I was pulled into Zhu Yi's embrace. He asked me, "Why are you running?" The last time he spoke to me was 3 years ago. Because I decided to join forces with the Crown Prince to deal with the third prince and the imperial consort, which led to a heated argument with him. I remained silent, avoiding his gaze. I only lowered my eyes, watching as his clean robe was stained by the mud on me. "What's going on?" Zhu Yi asked me again, his voice soft but unable to hide his concern. He was already very weak at that time, but I was too drunk to notice. I wanted to tell him about my true origins, to let him know my confusion and pain, but the words were on the tip of my tongue, yet I couldn't bring myself to say them. I haven't treated him well, so how can I have the face to seek comfort from him? Even more so, I cannot drag him into the conflict between me and the Crown Prince. The royal family holds a magic array that can imprison him. Once he opposes the royal family, he will lose his freedom. So I broke free from Zhu Yi's embrace and replied to him calmly, "Nothing's wrong. I just, on a whim, drank too much and accidentally ended up here. After saying that, I walked forward, but the pain from my ankle made me change my expression. The next second, Juyi picked me up in his arms. He looked indifferent, and his tone was equally detached. You've sprained your ankle. I'll take you back to where you're staying. Listening to Juyie's words, I suddenly felt a bit ridiculous. Of course, it was me who was laughable, not him, as husband and wife, living in the same mansion. Yet we must divide my residence from his. If on the night of our wedding, I were not afraid of snakes, not afraid of pain, had no lingering feelings for the crown prince, and no subconscious resistance to the wedding night with someone I had never spoken to, would everything have turned out differently? What's done is done. I couldn't help but feel sad, yet I felt I didn't deserve to be sad. The bitter fruit was of my own making, and I should swallow it myself. Pretending to be overwhelmed by the wine, I nestled closer into Juyi's embrace. Juyi's body stiffened slightly, holding me even tighter. That night was the first time Juyi and I had a calm, conflict-free conversation since we got married. The next morning, Juyi and I returned to our usual ways. I left early and returned late, striving for the rights I desired. A year has passed, and I haven't seen Juyi even once, and we've become like strangers again. The memories fade away as I look at Juyi before me. I want to cry, but I can't help but smile. The rebirth that Juyi risked his life to give me has led to a marriage between us that is completely different from our previous life. Juyi didn't understand why I suddenly laughed while talking about my own background. His brows still furrowed, I reached out to smooth his forehead for him, unable to resist saying, Juyi, I really like you so much. 18. Juyi didn't expect me to suddenly confess to him like I was acting cute. His pupils slightly widening, I was amused by his innocent demeanor and leaned in to kiss his cheek. Juyi said he wanted to cook personally to make up a birthday feast for me. I knew that the scale of the birthday feast he mentioned would probably be similar to the full Manchuhan banquet that Ling Yu had in mind, so I quickly stopped him. Just make me a bowl of longevity noodles instead. I am just a mortal. Learning magic does not mean I can possess a long lifespan. Yet, Juyi is a descendant of the serpent deity. As long as his divine power remains, his lifespan is destined to be thousands of times longer than mine, and I will only be a fleeting shadow in the long river of his years. In my past life, this was one of the reasons I retreated in front of him, because I lacked love so much. I yearned to be loved. I wanted to be cherished in someone's heart forever. Not just a passerby in their life for a while, but in this lifetime, I won't worry about that anymore. Life is short, seize the day, live as long as you can, but the most important thing is not to waste the good times. With that thought, I wrapped my arms around Juyi's neck and kissed him. On the night of my actual birthday a few days ago, you already gave me the best birthday gift. Candle Knight stared at me, not reacting. I smile and whisper seductively in his ear. Another summer night's rain. It was already 2 hours later when I ate the longevity noodles that Juyi made for me. Just after finishing, Princess Changning came to give me a birthday gift. She bought me the latest fashionable clothes and jewelry, and brought a kite she had made herself. Seeing the beautiful kite, my eyes felt a bit sore. On this day in my previous life, Changning also came to the state preceptor's residence, promising to fly kites with me together in the coming spring. Unfortunately, when spring arrived the following year, she was no longer there. I looked towards Changning. Your marriage with Shen Jinghui. Changning looked at me with a hint of shyness. It's already settled, just 3 months from now. I instantly furrowed my brows tightly. I thought that after I hit Shen Jinghui and brought the matter before the Empress would investigate Shen Jinghui and then discover that he is not a good person, thus becoming unwilling to let Changning marry him. After all, compared to me, a daughter in name only, Changning is the cherished pearl that has been under the Empress's care for many years. The bond between them runs much deeper. But I never expected. The Empress would not only abandon me for the Crown Prince but also abandon Changning for him. Shen Jinghui's mother has already passed away, so even though he is the Empress's nephew and shares a blood relation, the lack of that additional bond makes the Empress and the Crown Prince uneasy about him. That's why they hope he will marry Changning, to strengthen their ties even further. Seeing my gloomy expression, Changning was startled. "Sister Mingjiao, what's wrong with you?" I took Changning's hand and looked at her intently. "Changning, do you want to marry Shen Jinghui?" Hearing this, Changning blushed. Lord Shen is handsome, and the Marquis's household has been thriving in recent years. Marrying him would benefit both the Empress and the Crown Prince. I am willing." I let go of Changning's hand, as if seeing my past self, feeling a mix of frustration and disappointment. Marrying Shen Jinghui may benefit the Empress and the Crown Prince, but for you, the disadvantages far outweigh the advantages. Also, what does Shen Jinghui count as handsome? Zhu Yi beats him by 1,000 miles. I stood up, wanting to take Changning to visit the nearby male brothel. Let her see what truly handsome men who rely on their looks to serve others really look like. However, after taking just 2 steps with her, I saw Zhu Yi stepping over the threshold and entering. Both Changning and I halted in our tracks. I was feeling guilty. After all, the male brothel was a place where men entertained clients. As for Changning, she had always been afraid of Zhu Yi, so she didn't dare to move. In fact, few people in the entire capital are not afraid of Zhu Yi. After all, Zhu Yi always appears cold and gloomy to outsiders, and with his divine power, he is extremely formidable. It makes people feel that offending him would inevitably lead to a miserable death. There are even rumors in the capital that Zhu Yi eats human hearts during the full moon. When Changning saw Zhu Yi, it was as if she had seen the king of hell, and she instinctively wanted to flee. After running a few steps, she suddenly remembered something, hesitated, then turned back. Took a small wooden box from her sleeve, and stuffed it into my arms. "Sister Mingjiao, I have something to do. I must go now." With that, Changning dashed away in a flash. I held the small wooden box and saw the inscription to a Jiao carved on it, so I knew who had entrusted Changning to deliver it to me, the Crown Prince. Zhu Yi saw the wooden box and didn't pay much attention at first. Seeing that I hadn't opened it, he thought I didn't have enough strength. So he took the box from my hand and opened it. I wanted to stop him, but it was already too late. Zhu Yi saw the wooden carving in the box. It depicted 2 children, a boy and a girl, both around 6 or 7 years old, sitting at a connected desk and reading. Every year on my birthday, the Crown Prince would give me a wooden carving that he had carved himself. Over the years, I have personally witnessed the Crown Prince's carving skills progress from clumsy to exquisite. So much so that at this moment, Zhu Yi recognized at a glance, the girl on the wooden carving is me, and the boy is the Crown Prince. Zhu Yi's gaze suddenly turned dark and sinister. A flash of light flickered on the finger, directly splitting the wooden carving in half. Then, without any hesitation, he threw the prince's half into the lake outside the window. For some reason, I suddenly felt a little like laughing. Zhu Yi took the remaining wooden carving to the small wooden hut behind the study. I didn't follow immediately. Instead, I sat at the desk, recording the major events that had happened in my previous life, so as not to forget them as time passed. After a few hours, I finally put down the pen and went to find Zhu Yi. I discovered that he had already recarved the half-finished wooden carving, and with great ingenuity, he had transformed the writing desk into a lotus leaf. So the little girl who was reading at her desk became the little girl lying on a lotus leaf picking lotus flowers. I have to say, it's quite adorable. Although I was never that innocent and lively when I was a child, I fiddled with this wooden carving for a little while, then turned to look at the other wooden carving that Zhu Yi was carving in his hand. He, in the form of a youth, and I, also in the form of a youth, sat facing each other across a chessboard, playing a game. Though it was a scene that had never actually occurred, he had carved it so vividly, as if such a day had truly existed in the past. However, my gaze drifted downward, and I noticed that for himself, Zhuyi had carved human legs, but for me, he had carved a serpent's tail. What kind of twisted taste is this? I couldn't help but frown. Zhuyi noticed my expression and paused his movements. Did I not carve it well? I fell silent for 2 seconds before speaking. You carved it very well. Comparable to a master. But, did I not tell you that I don't really like snakes? Suddenly stabbed in the heart by me, Zhuyi froze, his entire being visibly slumped into despondency. As soon as the words left my mouth, I realized my mistake and quickly corrected myself. What I mean is, I don't really like snakes other than you. Zhuyi pursed his lips, not responding to my words. I regretted it deeply, sat down beside Zhuyi, and reached out to poke him. Zhuyi turned his head away. Refusing to look at me, I hugged Zhuyi and, in an attempt to explain, began telling him about my childhood. Actually, before I was 6 years old, I really liked snakes. I remember there was an injured snake that entered the royal mansion back then. It was exceptionally beautiful, so I picked it up and secretly fed it cooked meat. But later, the princess saw the snake and was frightened by it. She was furious. So she had the snake killed, and then, I paused for a moment before speaking in a light tone, and to punish me, she threw me into the snake pit. Zhuyi lowered his head to look at me, pulling me into his embrace. In my past life, whenever I recalled this incident, my body would involuntarily tremble, but now, leaning against Zhuyi, I felt no fear. As if I were speaking of someone else's story, I shifted to a more comfortable position in Zhuyi's arms and continued. The snake pit was pitch black, the entrance above sealed shut by massive stones. I couldn't get out, and I couldn't see clearly. All I could hear was the hissing of countless snakes, feel them slithering over my body, and then being bitten by them. Princess Anan didn't intend for me to die. She only released non-venomous snakes, but I didn't know that. I was already running a high fever that day, and in the snake pit, I was terrified, cold, in pain, and heartbroken. Unable to understand why Mother hated me so much, at this point, I paused, looking up at Zhuyi. In my daze, I felt someone pick me up. I tried to see who it was, but all I could see was the moonlight falling. Zhuyi tightened his arms around me. My gaze flickered slightly as I observed Zhuyi's expression and continued. The next day when I woke up, I was already lying in the temple near the snake pit, with no signs of snake bites on my body. The crown prince stood before me. Looking at me with concern, I asked the crown prince how I got there, and he said he didn't know. I thought everything that happened in the snake pit was just an illusion, but from then on, I started to fear snakes. Zhuyi suddenly spoke coldly. The crown prince said he didn't know. Hearing this, I made a judgment in my heart and nodded, saying, I believed this for many years, only to realize later that it was wrong. That night in the snake pit, I was indeed bitten all over by snakes and was indeed saved by someone. As I said this, I reached out and hooked my arm around Zhuyi's neck, gazing deep into his eyes. Was it you who saved me that night? My question was faintly tinged with the tone of a statement. Candle Knight met my focused gaze and kissed me. It was me. I gaze at Zhuyi. I had my suspicions about this matter in my past life, but by then, my relationship with Zhuyi had already deteriorated to the point of no return. My struggle with the crown prince had also reached a fever pitch. Several times, I picked up a lantern intending to go find Zhuyi, only to turn back halfway each time. So the events that happened when I was 6 years old in my previous life were only truly confirmed and brought to light at this moment. For a moment, I was overwhelmed with a mix of emotions. I wanted to laugh, but my eyes welled up with tears first. So it turns out, in this world, the first person who was kind to me, it wasn't the Empress, nor the Crown Prince, it was Zhuyi. The last person who was kind to me, it was also Zhuyi. Going round and round, from beginning to end, it has always been Juye. Juye told me that when he carried me into the temple that night, the crown prince was playing by the roadside with the maids and eunuchs, so, the crown prince has always known, he just deceived me. After hearing this, I fell silent. Should I blame the crown prince? But he was only 6 years old at that time. But, holding Juye, I spoke in a muffled voice. If I had known back then that it was you who saved me, I wouldn't have been so resistant when I was about to marry you. Juye immediately seized the key point, narrowing his eyes dangerously. You're really against the idea of marrying me? Me? I accidentally dug my own grave. I took a light breath and smoothed Candle Knight's fur. No, his scales. I never even spoke to you back then. Every time I saw you, you were sitting in a high position, with a gloomy face. Your true form is still the snake I fear. In such circumstances, it's quite normal that I didn't dare to marry you, right? But every time I hear the palace servants say, the state preceptor is the most beautiful person in the world, I wholeheartedly agree. Juye's beauty is undeniable to everyone in the entire imperial court who has seen him. He is truly a peerless gentleman, unmatched in this world. With every word I speak, I give Juye a kiss. Juye was kissed by me until he had no strength to retort. Unable to resist, he gently pinched the back of my neck and pulled me away. I looked up at him with a pitiful gaze. Juye had already been softened by my kisses, yet he still pretended to be firm and said, I have a gloomy face because you and the crown prince are always seen together. Naturally, I can't put on a pleasant expression. I couldn't help but laugh, reaching out to poke Juye's chest again. Actually, I've always been curious about one thing, Juye. Why do you like me? When I was 6 years old, you came to save me. I guess you just happened to pass by, saw me pitiful, and did a good deed on a whim. But after that, we had no further interactions. Juye grasped my hand that was causing mischief on his chest, staring intently at me. I have never had the habit of passing by the mountain snake den to save people. The meaning behind Juye's words is, I couldn't help but freeze. Looking at him in astonishment, Juye met my gaze and spoke with utmost seriousness. Ming Jiao, whether you believe it or not, from the past to the present, I have come only for you. If I had heard Juye say these words to me at any other time, I would have found it romantic, but I was only 6 years old at the time. Aren't you being a bit of a beast? I frowned, looking at Juye with disapproval. Juye looked at me speechlessly, reaching out to give a light tap on my head. What were you thinking? You were so young back then, how could I have had any other thoughts? I pretended to be hurt by the tap, letting out a soft ouch. Juye immediately reached out to rub my head for me. Does it hurt? I clearly lightened my touch. I took the opportunity to bury myself in Juye's embrace. Then, why did you come for me at that time? Juye paused the motion of rubbing my head, and only after a few seconds did he continue. I was getting a bit drowsy from the candle at night. And seeing that he wasn't speaking, I began to guess on my own. Do you know the elders around me? Did they ask you to come save me? No. Then have you seen me before this? Juye let out a soft hum and lowered his gaze to look at me. You have done me a great favor. I never expected it to be for such a reason. Before I turned 6, I could hardly take care of myself, let alone do favors for others. After much thought, the only thing I can recall is that snake I once fed meat to. Are you that beautiful little snake? Juye, you could say that. Can that really be considered as such? I don't understand. Back then, I watched that snake get beaten to death with my own eyes. Juye, it wasn't my true form, I just attached a bit of my consciousness to it. My question was answered, but an even greater confusion arose in my heart. Juye said he came for me, so, when I picked up that injured snake back then, was it really just a coincidence? If it wasn't a coincidence, then what was the origin of everything? That night, I had a dream. In the dream, my legs transformed into a beautiful snake tail. In the night sky, lightning flickered, extremely terrifying. as if a heavenly tribulation had descended, and by my side there was an illusory figure accompanying me, anxiously calling out, "Zhu Ming." When I woke up the next day, everything in the dream had become hazy. The real sky was azure and clear, with no wind or rain. I waved goodbye to Zhuye, boarded the carriage, and left the Grand Preceptor's residence. Last time we met, Zhong Lingyu and I agreed to meet again today at a temple on the mountain outside the city, one with very few worshippers. Zhong Lingyu was very punctual. I had just entered the temple when she arrived right after me. I have already discussed it with my mother and am willing to pay any price necessary to avoid marrying the crown prince. Zhong Lingyu looked at me and spoke earnestly. After listening, I directly handed her a small booklet. Inside were the follow-up plans I had formulated based on the events of my past life and my analysis of the current situation. Zhong Lingyu opened it, carefully read through to the end, and smiled. She couldn't help but sigh. Even though I've been living in this world for over a decade, why do I still have the mindset of a modern engineering student, without learning any of the political maneuvering skills you people possess? I also laughed. Your abilities are no less than mine. I meant every word of it. Zhong Lingyu understood many things and could even make glass, cement, cannons. Everything in this world has its great purpose. To me, she is a true treasure. With the deliberate arrangements made by Zhong Lingyu and me, rumors of discord between us quickly spread throughout the capital. Although I am fully confident in my path to seize the throne after my rebirth, even with the certainty of victory, I must still consider the worst possible outcomes when taking action. In the race between the tortoise and the hare also believed it would surely win. And what was the result? Pride goes before a fall. It has always been this way. That is why I must feign discord with Zhong Lingyu, on one hand, to lure the crown prince and the third prince's factions into taking the bait. On the other hand, if I truly prove to be so incompetent as to fail in my endeavors in the future, Lingyu will be able to distance herself from me and avoid being implicated. Rumors spread like wildfire, growing with the wind and spreading wider and wider. Even the incident where I previously had Zhuye lend a carriage to send Zhong Lingyu and her mother home was dug up and exposed, and my goodwill, with the help of Zhong Lingyu and myself, was naturally interpreted by most people in the capital as ill intentions. I heard that the princess didn't want the young lady from General Zhong's family to become the crown princess. First, she deliberately sent someone to damage the Zhong family's carriage, then pretended to be kind to get close to the young lady, but in reality, she secretly drugged her, causing the young lady to break out in red rashes all over her body. The young lady from the Zhong family is already quite tall, making it difficult for her to marry, and now her appearance has been ruined. She's been feeling depressed and has fallen seriously ill. The princess is no longer unmarried, yet she treats the young lady from the Zhong family so cruelly. I wonder how the crown prince will react when he hears about this. What else can be done? Our crown prince is a hopeless romantic. I think Miss Zhong can only swallow this bitter pill in silence. Zhong Lingyu and I wore veiled hats that concealed our faces as we stood by the railing, listening to the discussions from the people downstairs. Zhong Lingyu's mother came from a merchant family and had a remarkable talent for business. This restaurant was one of her properties. I toyed with the lotus flower in my hand and said to Zhong Lingyu, "It seems the third prince's men can't wait to make their move. I don't want Zhong Lingyu to marry the crown prince because I know she yearns for freedom, and the third prince doesn't want Zhong Lingyu to marry the crown prince because she comes from a military family. And he doesn't want the crown prince to use this opportunity to gain control over military power." Zhong Lingyu listened to my words and nodded. "Those people downstairs only dare to gossip about you, me, and the crown prince, not daring to mention your family's state preceptor at all. That's definitely the style of the third prince's faction in the book." Once again, a word was silenced by the world's rules. Under the veil of her hat, Zhong Lingyu couldn't help but roll her eyes. I looked at Zhong Lingyu and smiled. It's time for us to put on another act. After I finished speaking, I walked into the elegant room that Zhong Lingyu had reserved and overturned the table inside with a single motion. After practicing dual cultivation with Zhu Yi for a while, my already considerable strength grew even greater. In just one day, the news of Zhong Lingyu and I crossing paths in the tavern, despising each other at first sight, and smashing each other's elegant rooms spread throughout the entire capital. The next day, Changning came to see me, saying she was going to host a banquet at her newly built princess mansion and invited me to attend. At the same time, Lingyu also received the invitation handed over by Changning. I knew that Changning, under the Empress's instruction, wanted to mediate between Lingyu and me, so I gladly agreed. Because this was already part of my plan, Lingyu and I went to the banquet together, and then, due to a disagreement, we ended up arguing again at the event. Now, whether it be commoners in the streets or nobles in the palace, whether it be women confined to the inner chambers or men standing in the court, all will know and be certain that my relationship with Lingyu has deteriorated to the extreme. The banquet ended on a sour note. As I prepared to leave the princess's residence, I was stopped on the way by the crown prince. It was expected. I looked at the crown prince before me, waiting for him to speak, seeing the lingering anger on my face. The crown prince softened his voice and said to me, "Ah Jiao, since you don't like the young lady of the Zhong family, I will marry another daughter from a military family instead." Although I had long anticipated the crown prince would say this, hearing it with my own ears still inevitably stirred a sense of disgust. In the eyes of the crown prince, women are merely objects, tools, and I am his most precious tool. However, those who love power, engage in politics, and seek to seize the throne, their hearts are all blackened. I am also using the crown prince, and it's equally disgusting. Seeing that I remained silent, the crown prince spoke again. "Ah Jiao, I don't want you to be unhappy." He spoke with deep affection, having believed the newly spread rumors from the third prince's faction outside, thinking that I still had feelings for him and wanting to rekindle our past relationship. I didn't respond to the crown prince's words. Calculating the time, I looked up a few seconds later, gazing into the distance. Sure enough, I saw Zhuye. Zhuye was dressed in a wide-sleeved, luxurious robe embroidered with silver patterns on a blue background, the same color scheme as the clothes I was wearing. I immediately saw through Zhuye's little scheme and had to restrain myself to keep from smiling. I coldly brushed past the crown prince, walked to Zhu Yi's side, and left shoulder to shoulder with him. Behind me, the crown prince's gaze turned icy. Zhu Yi described the crown prince's expression to me. I smiled and said, "Don't mind him. In my previous life, I never wanted Candle Knight to get involved in my struggle for the throne, but the consequence was that Candle Knight sacrificed himself for me. I do not wish to see such a tragic ending repeat itself, so in this life, I invited Candle Knight to join me and help me early on. In my previous life, I was too stubborn, too sentimental, and too burdened by worries. In this life, with Zhuye's help, many things have become much easier. I used the various small animals and Lingyu that Zhuye helped me hypnotize to pass on information, which was very discreet and didn't worry about being discovered. I also handed the evidence that Lingyu wrote to me about her scumbag father and scumbag half-brother to the people of the third prince's faction. The supporters of the third prince, unaware that the crown prince had already decided not to marry Lingyu, began targeting Lingyu's scoundrel father and half-brother in various ways at court. Aiming to strike a blow against the crown prince, Lingyu's scoundrel father was extremely greedy for wealth, so these individuals accused him of seizing others' property and even hinted that he had embezzled military funds, frightening him into immediately entering the palace to confess his crimes to the emperor. Lingyu's scoundrel half-brother had a violent temperament, showed disrespect to his legitimate mother, beat and killed servants in the household. and even rounded up tenant farmers to shoot them as if they were prey. Such horrifying matters were similarly brought before the emperor. The emperor was furious, stripped Ling Yu's scumbag father of his general position, threw him into prison, and prepared to exile him to Lingnan. Ling Yu's scumbag half-brother was even directly sentenced to death. Ling Yu's mother took the divorce agreement to the prison to visit her husband, demanding that he sign it if he refused. She threatened to sue him for favoring his concubine over his wife. Ling Yu's scumbag father had lost his only son, and he himself had been demoted to a commoner and was about to be exiled. In just a few days, he had aged beyond recognition. Can't afford any more trouble, so I had to agree. Ling Yu was overjoyed and invited me to drink together in the mountains outside the city. My father, that scum, has finally fallen. He's nothing but a disgrace to humanity, a purely utilitarian man, for money. He married my mother, then looked down on her merchant background, treated her terribly in every way, and even favored his concubine over his wife. I originally came to you because I wanted my mom to get rid of that scumbag as soon as possible and live a good life. If my mom were in my time, she would definitely be a strong woman, the kind who could make it onto the rich list. As for my scumbag brother, there's no need to even mention him. My father, who favors sons over daughters, spoiled him rotten. He doesn't value human life and even bullied me and my mom. Zhong Lingyu was drunk, leaning on my shoulder and rambling non-stop. I patted her, playing the role of a good listener, occasionally chiming in with a word or two. I know that Lingyu came to my world with a heavy heart. In her previous life, she told me more than once that she wanted to take her mother back to her original world. That world upheld the idea of equality for all, where women could break free from the control of paternal and marital authority to live their own lives. I asked her if she had ever thought about promoting equality for all in this world. She smiled at me and said, "Not at all, not at all. If I were to actually do that, it would be like shaking the very foundation of your authority. You, who value power above all else, would probably want to kill me." I nodded, following her lead, just thinking about killing you, not actually doing it. She pretended to be startled, exaggeratedly shivered, then sighed and became serious. This world doesn't even have the imperial examination system. Official selection still depends on family background and reputation. There's simply no foundation for promoting equality for all. At the very least, it will take several hundred more years. The feudal dynasty is only halfway through its development, and this world still has beings like the descendants of the serpent god. Immortals and mortals are destined to be unequal. I can only do my best to spread this idea behind your back, to let the pitiful people at the very bottom develop the courage to rise from the mud. Beyond that, I simply can't do anything more. Lingyu spoke to the end, filled with melancholy. I didn't tell her that I had always admired her. I wanted to become the emperor, more for my own sake, but she wanted to support me as emperor, more for the sake of the oppressed. How fortunate I am to have met such a brilliant soul. By the time we returned to the state preceptor's residence, dusk had already fallen. The sunset was infinitely beautiful, and Zhuyi sat in the light, yet he shone even brighter than the light itself. Overwhelmed by the effects of the wine, I threw myself directly into his arms. Zhuyi held me, smelling the strong scent of alcohol on me, with a mix of helplessness and affection. "How did you end up drinking like this?" Zhuyi fed me some hangover soup, and seeing that I had no other discomfort, he carried me to take a bath, wanting me to sleep early. My mind was still a bit hazy, and in the bathtub, I clung to Zhuyi, not letting him leave. I want to take a bath with him. A few days ago, I had my period, so when we were intimate at night, we used our hands. I've been craving it for a while. The next morning, I woke up without a hangover. But perhaps because I had been exposed to the cold wind on the mountain with Zhong Lingyu for too long yesterday, I caught a chill and started coughing. It seemed this had happened in my previous life as well. That time, I was much more seriously ill than this, so during the day, various brewed herbal medicines would always appear on the desk. At night when I had a fever, a hand would also rest on my forehead. I didn't see a face, nor did I hear a voice, but I knew it was Zhu Yi. Even though we hadn't spoken for a long time and had grown extremely distant, he would still come to take care of me when I was sick. How could one not be moved? Looking back now, I realize that my feelings for Zhu Yi in my previous life began that very night. Love in the smallest details is hard to notice, but once noticed, it touches the heart the most. And in this life, I watch as Zhu Yi's hand rests on my wrist. Do you also know medicine? Zhu Yi glanced at me. No, but my ability to regenerate flesh and bone has never relied on medicine. It's always been divine power. It seems I'm really sick and confused to ask such a silly question. After saying this, Zhu Yi channeled divine power from my wrist into my body. My illness was instantly cured without any medicine. I should be happy, but then I remembered my past life. At that time, Zhu Yi didn't grant me divine power because he was already severely weakened by the backlash of the marriage contract. Right, thinking of this, I couldn't help but feel heartache. I turned over, pinned Zhu Yi down on the bed, and kissed him. Let's do it a few more times to make up for what we missed in our previous life. In the afternoon, I got up from bed and wrote to Lingyu, asking about her health. I remember in my previous life when I fell ill, she also got sick. And it seems I can't escape it this time either. Sure enough, Lingyu replied, saying she now felt dizzy and had a sore throat, wishing she could have a cold pill. I didn't know what a cold pill was, but I figured it must be something that could cure illness, so I decided to become her cold pill. Late at night, with the help of Zhu Yi, I avoided all eyes and ears and sneaked into Lingyu's room. The general's mansion has been reclaimed, and Lingyu now lives with her mother in a newly purchased residence. Lingyu was startled to see me. How did you get here? I placed my hand on her wrist. I'm here to treat your illness. I'm not as skilled as Zhu Yi. Even after learning from him all day today and combining it with the cultivation I've gained before, I still can't heal Zhong Lingyu in an instant, but I can ease the pain of her illness and help her recover sooner. Lingyu looked at me with envy. If only I had divine power too. When I was a child watching TV dramas, I was always so envious of the fairies in them. I really agree with Zhong Lingyu's thoughts. Although I don't know what TV dramas are, in my past life, I also coveted Zhu Yi's divine power. I withdraw my hand, ready to leave. Zhu Yi is still waiting for me outside. Zhong Lingyu looked at me and exclaimed dramatically, "Help! Now I'm even more envious of you. I'm still single." I glanced at her and mercilessly exposed her pretense. What are you envious of? You're clearly a non-marriage advocate. In my past life, she always told me how great it was to be single, and what annoyed her the most was her mother pressuring her to get married. She said that in the original world, there were quite a few women who hadn't married by the age of 26, but in this world, she had become the most peculiar oddity under heaven and earth. Zhong Lingyu, upon hearing my words, instinctively laughed, then froze. Hey, how did you know I'm a marriage-free advocate? Realizing I had spoken out of turn, I pretended not to hear and simply walked away. Behind, Zhong Lingyu watched my receding figure and sighed softly. I hope you and Zhu Yi can have a good ending, not like in the book, where it's just endless tormenting until no one survives in the end, but in this life, many things are different from what was recorded in the book. You're sure to live well. After saying this, Zhong Lingyu couldn't help but curse the heavens under her breath. What's going on? I'm just talking to myself, and you're muting me too. Outside the courtyard gate, Zhu Yi's ears twitched almost imperceptibly. His face was hidden in the night, indistinct and unclear. After Zhong Lingyu recovered from her illness, under my arrangements, she and her mother left the capital. Officially, it's a trip back to the ancestral home in the north to pay respects to the ancestors, but in reality, Only Zhong Lingyu's mother will head north to handle business and make money on my behalf. As for Zhong Lingyu herself, she will head south to the fiefdom where Zhu Yi resides, to produce era-defining weapons like cannons for me. As the state preceptor, Zhu Yi's fiefdom is located near the Dragon's Rising land. Back then, the announcement of this fiefdom's location directly shook the entire court. A group of ministers jointly submitted a petition, urging the emperor to choose another location as the fief for the state preceptor. They believed that the Dragon's Rise land held extraordinary political significance, and even someone as esteemed as the state preceptor should not be granted a fief there. However, the emperor insisted on having his way and ultimately selected the Dragon's Rise land, though not near the central area. In my previous life, I had also been puzzled by this. Later, I learned that all of this was not a royal favor, but a royal scheme. Within the land of the Dragon's Rise, a massive imprisonment array was set up. It restrained Zhu Ye, preventing him from hypnotizing members of the royal family and even more so from killing them. In my previous life, I had once visited Zhu Ye's fiefdom. It was more of a forbidden land than a fiefdom, strictly guarded and desolate, accessible only to direct descendants of the royal family, but it had mountains and rivers, and the area was vast, making it an ideal place to hide and train troops or conduct research. Zhong Lingyu was not a direct descendant of the royal family, but with Zhu Yi's help, it was easy to open another passage for her in the formation. At this moment, I looked at Zhong Lingyu's mother. Next February, the weather will be unusually severe, with continuous heavy snowstorms sweeping across the north, causing a snow disaster that will eventually affect the capital. On your journey north, you should stock up on more grain and charcoal. Zhong Lingyu turned to me in surprise, placed a hand on my shoulder, and pulled me aside. Who exactly is that time traveler friend of yours? They're even more meticulous than I am, digging out details like the snow disaster that was only briefly mentioned in the book and telling you about it. I smiled. You'll find out later. After seeing Zhong Lingyu and her mother off, I rode my horse back to the city. Upon returning, I happened to witness Shen Jinghui forcibly abducting a commoner's daughter on the street. Frowning, I immediately lashed out with my whip. Shen Jinghui saw it was me. Angry but not daring to speak, I glanced at the girl still being held by Shen Jinghui and said coldly, "Let go." Shen Jinghui remembered what happened last time in the palace and reluctantly released his hand. I scooped up the girl and placed her in front of me on the horse. Asking where she lived, the girl timidly gave me a location, and I rode off with her. Shen Jinghui watched my retreating figure, his anger causing veins to bulge on his forehead. Upon reaching her home, the girl dismounted and immediately knelt down to kowtow in gratitude. I stopped her, said no need, then turned the reins and left. In the days that followed, I became even busier, because of the Zhong family incident. The third prince's faction and the crown prince's faction grew increasingly hostile toward each other. I had ignited this fire and now began to add more fuel to it. The marriage between Chongning and Shen Jinghui hasn't fallen through yet. I stayed behind the scenes, first sending a pile of evidence of Shen Jinghui's crimes to the third prince's side. Because Shen Jinghui is the empress's nephew, the third prince had long wanted to suppress the marquis's household where Shen Jinghui belonged. Now that he had the opportunity, he immediately took action with his people. I then informed the crown prince's side about all the various actions the third prince had taken against him and Shen Jinghui. Soon, the crown prince's side also made quite a stir. The two sides went back and forth, fighting fiercely. As the instigator, I was so busy that I never got a full night's sleep. Several times, I fell asleep at my desk and was carefully carried to bed by Zhu Yi. Fortunately, the results have been very encouraging. With my efforts to deliver incriminating evidence to both sides, within just 6 months, a large number of incompetent officials were swept away as they became casualties of the conflict between the two parties. And long before that, I had already selected replacements for these officials. I then spent a great deal of effort discreetly placing them into their positions, including the brother of the girl I saved from Shun Jinghui that day. The girl's brother was actually quite average in ability, but the girl herself was very intelligent and strategic, helping her brother become a minor official and thrive within the circle of minor officials. I recognized her talent and, after several maneuvers, brought her under my command. Before the new year arrived, the struggle between the Crown Prince's faction and the Third Prince's faction finally reached a preliminary conclusion. The Third Prince's faction emerged victorious. With the Emperor's favoritism and the support of the consort's family, the day the consort was elevated to imperial consort marked the defeat of the Crown Prince and the Empress. The marriage arrangement between Shun Jinghui and Princess Changning was called off, and the various misdeeds Shun Jinghui had committed over the past few years were brought to light one by one in the following months. Shun Jinghui was thrown into the dungeon. When I learned the news, I was practicing archery at the residence of the state preceptor. With one arrow, I shot down the target representing Shun Jinghui. Changning's marriage was called off, and the Crown Prince and Empress were suppressed by the Third Prince and the imperial noble consort, leaving them deeply distressed. Feeling somewhat guilty towards her, I organized a banquet for her, inviting a group of talented scholars and beautiful ladies to accompany her and bring her joy. The effect of the banquet exceeded my expectations. Changning actually took a liking to a gentle and talented scholar. I had someone investigate, and found no issues with this person, so I allowed Changning to associate with them. On the anniversary of the King of Annam's death, a heavy snowstorm fell upon the capital. I braved the wind and snow to leave the city and went to pay my respects at his tomb. It was not out of genuine filial piety, but rather to show the people of the capital that I possessed such virtue. The scenes I had previously performed with Zhong Lingyu had, to some extent, tarnished my reputation. This is how the world works. If a man marries a wife but still thinks of other women, people will sigh and call him devoted. If a woman marries a husband but still thinks of other men, people will curse her for not upholding womanly virtues, for being fickle and promiscuous, for straying from the marriage. Fortunately, I don't care about the reputation in these people's mouths, but Zhu Yi does. He will hypnotize these people for me, making them unable to open their mouths and use such words to belittle me again. In this world, if one wishes to build a reputation for virtue, the path of filial piety is the best choice. Sure enough, after I paid my respects to the King of Anan and returned to the city covered in thick snow, the people of the capital praised me highly, with some even composing poems to extol my filial devotion. At that time, I was sitting in the study of the state preceptor's residence. Upon hearing this news, what came to mind was the tomb of the King of Anan. His tomb had been cleaned, left spotless, and adorned with expensive offerings of wine, meat, fruits, and vegetables. I yearned for my father's love when I was young, but after learning that the King of Anan was not my real father, I felt neither love nor hatred towards him. Yet there are those who, despite not having seen the King of Anan for nearly 20 years, still cannot let go of him. I couldn't help but shake my head and sigh softly. Empress, after the New Year festivities had passed, on the evening of the Lantern Festival, Zhuye invited me to go see the Lantern Fair together. I happily agreed. The trees were ablaze with lights, and the lanterns shone as bright as day. Just as we were enjoying ourselves, we unexpectedly ran into the Crown Prince. It's been a long time since we last met, and the Crown Prince has lost a lot of weight. At first glance, it's quite startling. As we passed each other, he called out to me, "Ah Jiao, do you still remember this sachet?" He picked up the sachet hanging from his waist and showed it to me. The sachet is a bit ugly. It was made by me personally for him during the Lantern Festival last year. It is also the only sachet I have ever made in both lifetimes. Zhu Yi tightened his grip on my hand. I looked up and gazed at the Crown Prince. It's been so long, I've long since forgotten. Afterwards, Juye got jealous and asked me for a sachet. I gave him a hair ribbon. On it, I had personally embroidered a snake pattern with gold and silver threads, much more exquisite and beautiful than the Crown Prince's sachet. I smiled and kissed Juye. You deserve better. After the Lantern Festival, the weather unexpectedly turned cold again. A snow disaster struck the north, forcing many victims to flee southward, with some gathering in the capital. I had long been prepared and, with the financial support of Zhong Lingyu's mother, began setting up shelters and distributing porridge. The court had previously confiscated the properties of a large number of officials, leaving the national treasury well-stocked and able to purchase grain from the south. As a result, this snow disaster did not lead to as many deaths from cold and starvation as it had in my previous life. On the second day of the porridge distribution, the puppets from the state preceptor's mansion, following my orders, brought back a pair of siblings from the northern region. The elder sister, in her 20s, was a delicate beauty as frail as a willow in the wind, named Liang Shangyan. The younger brother, just turned 18, was a robust and upright-looking man, named Liang Shangsuan. Liang Shangyan was a talented strategist, and both her parents had died because of the third prince. A few years ago, a war broke out between the north and foreign tribes. The third prince, driven by greed for merit, recklessly advanced, leading to a major defeat. Afterwards, he made Liang Shangyan's father, an official of the north, take the blame. Liang Shangyan's mother appealed for her husband's injustice and was also killed. In her previous life, Liang Shangyan, seeking revenge, actively sought my support and did many things for me. Unfortunately, her health was extremely poor. Half a year before I was poisoned, she had already exhausted her life and passed away due to illness. As for her brother, he had long since died in this snow disaster. When Liang Shangyan was alive, she often mentioned her brother to me, saying that he had exceptional martial skills, was skilled in leading troops, and was a talented general.